To what extent did the decision in the Supreme Court case Obergefell v. Hodges mark a turning point in the gay rights movement? Over the extensive timeline of events in the gay rights movement, nothing thus far has made strides to complete equality like this Supreme Court case. Most of the court cases up to this point have failed to be passed, but with the Obergefell v. Hodges case, gay people have finally begun to see the results of a long and hard struggle for equal rights. The gay rights movement has been around for longer than records have dated it. The fight for gay rights began in 1924 with the formation of the first organization, the Society for Human Rights, which was founded by Henry Gerber in Chicago. Throughout the years, other organizations formed. In 1950, the Mattachine Society was formed by activist Harry Hay. Organizations like these were created to bring social acceptance and support to homosexual people. In the 1950s, the backlash against organizations like these and the LGBT community in general intensified when the American Psychiatric Association listed homosexuality as a sociopathic personality disturbance. This, along with other mental health issues, were considered dangerous and were frightening to people, causing further resistance against the admission of homosexual people in society. These things were used in and contributed to the Lavender Scare that began in the 1950s, and much like the Red Scare, created a sense of fright that discriminated against and further marginalized gay people during this time. On April 27, 1953, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed Executive Order 10,450 that banned homosexuals from working for the federal government, claiming that they were a security risk, citing any criminal, infamous, dishonest, immoral, or notoriously graceful conduct, habitual use of intoxicants to excess, drug addiction, or sexual perversion. At this time, the stigma around homosexual people bled into positions that they could hold in the government and other areas of their lives. Beginning in the 1960s, homosexuality began to become marginally more accepted. Some states like Illinois repealed sodomy laws starting in 1961. This showed increasing acceptance and integration of the LGBT community into society and showed how the federal government was beginning to include laws that were not completely against the gay rights movement. In 1961, the first documentary about homosexuality aired in California, and with the growing prevalence of homosexual people in the community, television shows began to include this community. With increasing recognition in media, the gay rights movement made strides. On June 28, 1969, the police raided local gay bar, the Stonewall Inn, in New York City. This event sparked the civil rights movement in America by highlighting the injustices that the gay people experienced in both this event and also in life. This event sparked protests and demonstrations throughout New York and also America. In 1969, the Los Angeles Advocate, the oldest LGBT publication, was founded as a way to increase personal rights for LGBT people, increasing media coverage on the LGBT community activity and further protruding into the forefront of society. 1 year after the Stonewall raid, the community of LGBT people in New York marched to commemorate the anniversary of the riots. This was the beginning of the modern Pride Parade and signified the first step in building a worldwide network of support. Even with these improvements in public opinion, in January of 1973, Maryland banned same-sex marriage, showing that most people still opposed equal rights for LGBT people, even if strides towards equality were occurring. Although later that year, the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from the list of mental disorders. Throughout the next couple decades, people in large roles in society began to come out to the world. Elaine Noble became the first openly gay candidate elected to state office. Technical Sergeant Leonard P. Matlavick revealed his sexual orientation to his commanding officer, and Harvey Milk was inaugurated as San Francisco city supervisor. These brave people came out to the world despite heavy setbacks that they would face in their jobs and in their life, some even leading to violence against them. Harvey Milk was murdered 2 months after his election, and his death inspired the first pride flag stitched by Gilbert Baker in rainbow as a symbol of pride and hope for the LGBT community. In the case Obergefell v. Hodges, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 5-4 on June 26, 2015, that state bans on same-sex marriage and on recognizing same-sex marriages duly performed in other jurisdictions are unconstitutional under the Due Process and Equal Protection Clauses of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This case epitomized the fight for gay rights by connecting the LGBT community to a tradition that has been held by straight people for centuries. This action brought further equality for the community. The years of fighting for equal rights finally gained a victory at this point, after almost 100 years of fighting. The sociological effects of Obergefell vs. Hodges are shown through one woman, Edith Windsor's story, The Perfect Wife, written by Ariel Levy. This story describes the ways that attorneys have to take into account the things that will appeal to the audience and not offend them. When selecting the ideal plaintiff, one experienced movement attorney told me, "Women are better than men. Post-sexual is better than young. From the Bible onward, two men having intercourse has been viewed as a more disturbing to the social order than two women doing whatever it is that lesbians do. For people to embrace same-sex marriage, they need to focus on the universal desire for romantic love and commitment. Love and committed intimacy. Provided that Kaplan kept her client muzzled on the topic, Americans could imagine that Edie Windsor had aged out of her carnality. This goes along with the way that society has formed the gay rights movement. People must be comfortable with the idea of it before equality is passed. This means that since the decision of Obergefell vs. Hodges case was passed, there has been more acceptance of the LGBT community. Politically, there have been many changes in the laws surrounding gay rights that have been passed, where single LGBT individuals could adopt in Kentucky before Obergefell. Same-sex married couples will now be able to do so as well. The most major change from an administrative standpoint is that forms will require an update from mother and father to a more generic parent. But the law in the area is relatively black and white. Married couples may adopt in Kentucky, and same-sex marriages are now legal. Prior to the ruling, same-sex couples faced a myriad of difficulties and a largely gray legal area in adopting. The end of the prohibition on same-sex marriage will do away with the necessity for any of the various methods same-sex couples previously had to use for both partners to adopt. Along with this, other legislation has been passed to make same-sex marriage and heterosexual marriage create the same rules on both the economic and domestic sides of marriage. Culturally, Obergefell vs. Hodges has created a better sense of acknowledgement for the LGBT community. 3 years ago, when former Charleston County City Councilwoman Colleen Coden announced she was suing the state for the right to marry her then-fiancé, she waited anxiously for her neighbors to read the news. Instead of condemnation, her West Ashley community left encouraging notes, bottles of wine and flowers on her doorstep. Colleen said marriage equality has led to pretty transformative cultural changes in the last 2 years. Once you have marriage recognition, it generally creates more acceptance, she said. The tide of public opinion on same-sex marriage has shifted dramatically in the past 20 years. A record 64% of adults support marriage equality, according to a new Gallup poll, up from 27% in 1996. Warren Redmond Gress, director of the Charleston-based Alliance for Full Acceptance, said nowadays he rarely sees anyone bat an eye at him when he talks about his husband. With the passing of Obergefell vs. Hodges, society has seen gay marriage and many couples that are gay, which has normalized it in society, with both LGBT people feeling more comfortable to express themselves in society and others accepting them more. Our society is shifting to one of acceptance for the LGBT community. Finally, the long-term ramifications of this case are that with the general acceptance of same-sex marriage, our culture is moving towards understanding and recognition of the LGBT community. This will hopefully lead to more legislation being passed that support these people. While we have seen strides towards this, there's still large amounts of discrimination and hate towards this community in the workforce and the housing market, which most assumed would fall into a place after this ruling, but they have yet to come, even after 3 years. Creating a dent in the fight for gay rights has been a long and hard road. Beginning in 1924, the movement only achieved marriage equality in 2015, almost a century later. This does not diminish their work. Since then, society has advanced towards a more cohesive and accepting environment and will continue to progress in the future.